perfect. So thank you everyone for being here and also for the invitation to Conversazioni Linguistiche. It was not planned from the beginning, but it's a pleasure, of course, to share the first part of my PhD thesis, that is in progress work about the acquisition of negation in Italian as a second language. So first of all, to give also a bit of background where my PhD is built and like in which project I'm working. I'm working for the Net Lab, which is an SFB in Frankfurt, Göttingen and Tübingen University. And the PIs of my project are Irene Caloi, Cecilia Poletto, and Jacopo Torregrossa. And I'm working also with Giacomo Plesotto, which is soon to be a doctoral student in Frankfurt. The project mixes together two different perspectives, a syntactic approach that is, which has the objective of determining the syntactic nature of Italian negative concord icons, and to examine and to collect data from the acquisitional point of view to make sure that we can contribute with a cross-linguistic perspective on the theory. And so we use different methodologies, dialectological surveys, corpus investigation, and then some psycholinguistic methodologies as priming, acceptability judgment task, and self-paced reading. This is the plan. My research questions specifically are related to the acquisitional part. And the first one is, what are the developmental stages of negative concord structure in Italian as an L2? And how can interaction between the acquisition of negation and inflectional domain be modeled? And I'll now present also a bit of background, a theoretical background, why this is an interesting question. So I'm going to present some general theories about acquisition of negation in L2, the relationship between negation and the inflectional domain, the TP, and my corpus studies, one with Chinese learners of Italian and another one with a mixed L1. And yeah, if we have time later on, I'm also very interested to get your feedback on an experiment that we're planning, more specifically related to negative concord. So to start from a language that everyone can understand, and for most of the people probably is the first second language that we learn, it's in school. Developmental stages of negation acquisition have been investigated, and this is a general overview on how negation is acquired in English. So we have first a negator plus a verb or a full construction. Then what usually happens, like from the speaker perspective, is that there is this not analyzed don't. So it's simply a morpheme that is taken as an allomorphy of negation, but it's not analyzed. It's not really different from the pure not, let's say. So in construction like he don't like it, we can say that this is also because there is no agreement between the subject and the verb. Okay, the target-like structure should be he doesn't like it, right? Then what happens is that when auxiliaries are learned and acquired in target-like construct, especially with complex verbs, we have the negator, which takes the right place into the sentence. So it's following the inflected verb. So in this case, the auxiliary inflection and raising supports the acquisition of the negator placement. And the last step, of course, is the analyze don't or analyze auxiliaries. So we have tense inflection and person inflection and memory. And here I try to sum up different studies that have been dedicating the acquisition of second language, so English, German, French, and Italian. and I'll try to underline specific features that are common in all these languages. So we see, for instance, at the beginning, it's a general process of alpha acquisition to have a preverbal negator. So one of the first strategies that learners use is to put the negator and then a full sentence or a verb. The second step is usually, and it's critical, as we saw before for the English second and third step, for the verb movement. So we see, for instance, the discontinuous negation in French, where we have the negator ne, the verb, and the pas. So this no negation. And we see in German learning auxiliaries and modal verbs raising before the need. And in English, we already said. I'm going to talk a bit deeper later about Italian, where we basically don't see really a difference, no, from stage 1 to stage 2. And this is the interesting part. In the last stage, which is the full acquired negation, we can still see Italian not changing, right? We always have this preverbal negation, and especially for the first step, for the first stage, this is the only difference, is that we can have construction with the negation, subject, and then verb. But since Italian is a pro-drop language, we know that the subject is not always there in place, and we cannot be sure later on if the negator is actually before or after the subject in the early stages. So I try to have like a very like two identities without any kind of prejudice, but you have a native speaker talking to a non-native speaker, and it's a simple conversation. Do you come to the cinema, or do you want to come to the cinema with me? I don't come to the cinema with you, but how this will be presented in Italian in an interlanguage stage. Vieni al cinema? No, vengo al cinema con te. And in this answer, we cannot really see if the negator is actually preceding or not the subject, because we don't have a subject. And we could simply say, yeah, it's well put, it's in a proverbal stage, and so it's like fine, it's a fine production. But actually what I would like to think a bit more critically about is that this could still be a negation outside of the full sentence. So the construction will be no, vengo al cinema con te. So literally a negative operator scoping over a sentence. It could be the case that it's simply a phonological effect, or the morpheme non is not acquired. Non is the sentential negation in Italian, while no is the answer that we usually use. So it's the lexical negation, let's say. Previous studies, of course, have studied the relationship between the verb, especially the verb raising, and the negation. I'm presenting here Tomaselli and Schwartz that model the development of negation in German L2 from L1 Roland's learners as a preverbal negation stage, so what we saw before, postverbal negation, and then the separation between the construction, especially the verb, and the negator. And this also goes together with more complex structure that the learners acquire, and they claim that this mirrors also a gradual acquisition of the movement between D, from D to the inflection of the name, so from D to E, or from D to C even. So just to give also some examples, and maybe we have German native speakers here. So preverbal negation, this is like Sie nicht lesen das Buch, and this is of course no correct sentence in German. post-verbal negation, Sie kann nicht lesen das Buch, and then negation separation in strategies with, for instance, more complex structures with V2 movement, so heute liest sie das Buch, sie liest das Buch nicht, sie liest das Buch auch nicht. So we see here really the separation between the mediator and the verb. Also, Verhagen, 15 years ago, presented a study on the acquisition of Dutch as an Altschuh from Moroccan and Turkish speaker, which have very different negation strategies from the German or even Romance kind. And those two focus on the main findings. Subject-verb agreement marking emerges with auxiliary and support verb raising. So as we saw before with the German one, before we had auxiliaries emerging, and later on we have other like lexical verbs. Post-verbal negation appears before auxiliaries and modal, then lexical verbs, and post-verbal negation with lexical verbs appears only after an auxiliary acquisition. So they found this, she found this implication as scale of acquisition. So the main hypothesis that I like to try to present is that the full-fledged negation system is acquired contextually with a full TP structure. And this happens not only in languages with a post-verbal negator, but also in languages like Italian with a preverbal negator, because the TP structure is still developing. What I mean with fully acquired TP, I don't only consider here the verb raising and verb morphology. Of course, spatial features are important in the research, but I also consider subject-verb agreement, which in Italian happens in the TP domain, the adverb position, and clitic position. And later we will see in the example why each of those are relevant. Yeah, so simply I'll try to focus first and present first the results about the development of the negation and the acquisition, and in negative sentences, and then the developmental stages of negative concord structure. I'll present some Mandarin data, so what is, how is the Mandarin system and what it looks like, corpus description, how I code it, which is the part in which I could get more feedback probably, and then the results. So generally, Mandarin Chinese is an isolating languages, does not have agreement, has really poor inflection, there are no clitics, and adverbs are also or preverbal or postverbal, and usually they are at the beginning or in the end of the sentence. While Italian we know has a very complex morphology, especially verb morphology, has strong subject-verb agreement, and yeah, like also a very rich clitic system and a very rich adverb structure. The negation, of course, there are differences. Mandarin has two kinds of negators, one for imperfective and one for perfective negative marking, and they are generally, like this general rule, of course, preverbal. A strategy to answer polar questions, so yes/no questions, is the repetition of the negative marker, so vous or meio, plus the verb or an existential quantifier, while probably most of us know that in Italian we can simply answer with no, and we are happy with that in communication. And then Mandarin has a double negation reading, while Italian is a non-strict negative concord language. Just to give also a couple of examples about the difference in imperfective and perfective, you see here the positive sentence 20A, the negative one 20B, the negative one with perfective aspect with the imperfective negator, so the imperfective negator cannot be with a perfective marker le, which you can see in sentence A and in sentence C. When we have a perfective tense, we need to have the may do negative marker. Polar question, as I said before, there is the repetition of the old verb or existential, and then the double negation reading. So in cases like in which we have the double negation, we could have reading like everyone likes her. So no one does not like her, that's the meaning of everyone likes her. So my first corpus is the longitudinal corpus of Chinese learners of Italian. It's a corpus divided in 3 levels, and it's the biggest corpus that I could find, at least, with a controlled L1. So it's a written corpus, and it's a pseudo-longitudinal corpus because the learners have to produce the text at the beginning and at the end of the language course. So also this is interesting because we don't have the same learners in each of the level. And so it's also, when gathering a lot of data, it's like we didn't have to randomize the results by learners, for instance. And the coding. So the first error that I coded is the lexical choice of the negator. So when the negator non, so the sentential negator, was produced as no, this was clearly a mistake for me, and I coded it as an error for the reasons I explained before. The negation position, so in cases like negation plus sentence, so subject, verb, or a full sentence, like so a very external negation, this was an error because the negation is not well placed. Negative concord errors, and then non-target like constituent negation, which constituent negation can happen in Italian for certain structure, but I, of course, consider only the errors here. And then this strong TP, so this idea that the TP should be fully acquired and fully developed, consider the misplaced clitics, misplaced adverbs, and I was not so strict about adverb placement because we can still have a lot of movement considering, I don't know, more focused adverbs in Italian. Subject verb agreement and tense spectral features. So those were the 4 elements that I considered relating the TP in negative sentences. So this is important. So now, one after the other, I'm going to present different examples. First, the non-target flight production. I present here for clarity purposes only the sentences that I coded as errors, the target flight sentence, and the English translation. So, as the examples that we saw before, no, ho fatto una vacanza da sola. I coded it as an error. The target flight production should be non ho fatto una vacanza da sola. And I think this is the easy part. The negation position. So here in example 25, we see a post-verbal negation. So ma ci sono non. So there are not. Here the target flight production should be ma non ci sono troppe persone. Or we can see in example 26, actually a very interesting example because it mirrors the construction of, let's say, the negative quantifier in Chinese. So negation plus people. And here we see non persone piace, while the correct construction is non piace alle persone. And then the sentence 27 displays a very external relation, negation, outside, let's say, of the embedded sentence. Clitic position, I coded here missing clitics, as you can see in example 28, with the verb piacere, to like, with the clitic, and here there was no. The wrong position of the clitic in respect with the negation, and also the wrong position of the clitic in respect with complex verb constructions. So maybe later if we need clarification, we can go back. Same thing with the adverbs. Actually, with the adverbs, I coded mostly non-focused, non-constructive, not constructive focused sentences, because in constructive focused sentences we can have adverb movement, and also where the adverb was placed in between subject and the verb, the negator, and very low, the use of very low tense spectral adverbs. So in cases, for instance, of non ho studiato la pittura straniera mai, this is a very not direct-like production, or not the common production, I would say, in Italian, even if this was a bit hard to define a methodology to attack the adverbs. Subject-verb agreement. So in sentence number 34, we have a number agreement, also in sentence 35, and yeah, also 36. So yeah, this has more to do with the inflection of the verb, and so theoretically speaking, also with the acquired position and of the verb. And then also tense spectral features, so missing auxiliaries in past participle, for instance, missing verbs. A lot of times the verb to be is not present, and yeah, not inflected verbs like sentence 39. Male solo guardo, non essere male, is to be instead of is. So it's not wrong to look at them. So the result, I'll project now the result for each of these variables, because we analyze them as independent variables, so predictors, in order to predict the level of proficiency. So we use a cumulatively mixed model in which we have the level as dependent variable, and lexical item, negation position, and the TP features as independent variables. And the plotting of this model will be like this, more or less. It's an example. So you see the legend with the different level of proficiency, and you see the probability of negative sentences. So non-target-like negative sentences and target-like negative sentences for each of the level. So something relevant here is to look at the progression and the higher probability of finding in each level a target-like structure instead of a non-target-like. So those were the results that were, let's say, statistically relevant for each of these variables. So the lexical choice, no versus no, the position of the negator, and the TP features. And yeah, there you can see this similar progression in all of that. So this was a very positive result, but we still have a question, which is this L1 dependent? Is it because Chinese has a very weak TP structure, or the position of the negation is very different from the Italian one in the deep structure? Of course, lexical choice plays a role, but what we did is to analyze Lips corpus, which is Lessico Italiano Parlato da Stranieri, which is a spoken corpus and I was able here to have also the B2 level. And here I coded all the A1 and 2 levels starting from 2002, and only the 2002 data for B1, B2 to have a more or less balanced corpus. And the results that we applied the same model and the same coding system also for this. And the results were a bit different, actually unexpected. We still have a significant result for the strong TP. So our main hypothesis, we found similar tendencies for lexical choice and negation position with not significant results. However, this was mostly an issue for the threshold between A1 level and A2 level, as you can see with in the plots. B1 level is increasing from non-target-like to target-like probability. Also A2 level, and if we consider, sorry, also B1 level, and if we consider A2 and A1 together, we see a decrease in probability of finding target-like sentences in those levels. So probably here we need to or aggregate the data or simply present them like this. But yeah, let's say that anyway, the development is still present, even if it's not significant. So negational lexical choice and positional are predictors of proficiency level, and TP features error in negative sentences also are predictors of proficiency level. And so we think that this can support the claim that verb finiteness and negation acquisition interacts in Italian, as in languages with post-verbal negation. So it's not only characteristic of languages with post-verbal negation and verb raising of the negator, but it's also something relevant for Italian. Okay. I'll present also the negative concord data, even if we were not able to run statistical analysis on those because we don't have occurrences, but I think they are anyway interesting. I was hoping to jump, let's say, the non-strict negative concord system explanation, but since we don't have Italian native speaker, probably I just say something more about it. So Italian negation system is a non-strict in the sense, negative concord, in the sense that, yes, we need a negation and a negative element together in the sentence. So these negative elements alone cannot stand in a sentence without being licensed by negation, but it's not non-strict in the sense that when these elements appear in preverbal position, they can appear without the negation. And actually, sentences like 18, in which we have this element and the negation after it, are considered agrammatical or are considered with a double negation reading by the speakers. We cannot have sentences with this negative concord item, which is not licensed by the negator here. Another interesting phenomenon is that is the negative spread. So these negative elements can license other negative elements. So nobody saw anything, we express it as nessuno ha visto niente. So no one saw nothing. And yeah.
It's not nessuno non ha visto niente. It's not acceptable.
No, it's acceptable. Okay. Yeah. This is acceptable and has the meaning of nobody saw anything.
Logically, it probably mean the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nessuno non ha visto niente. That would mean at least someone saw something, right? Or...
Yeah.
So there are different interpretations, and there are tests on this. However, from the grammatical point of view, and I think the if I remember correctly, the 80% of the speaker have the negative concord reading with the negative spread. Of course, some speakers prefer probably the one with more meta-linguistic awareness prefer the double negation reading and the logical reading here. So the main questions are, what are the stages of acquisition of non-strict negative concord system and of negative concord items? So nessuno, niente, no one, nothing. Yeah, how is Italian negative concord acquired by various different elements? And the data that I collected were pretty clear. Negative concord strongly emerges at A2 level. Those are the results from the Lockley corpus, so the Chinese speaker corpus. So we see that at the A1 level, speakers were finding other strategies probably to express the same concept, but at A2 level, they express negative concord with an 83% accuracy. And it's interesting to see also, for more broad discussions, the production of pronouns versus the production of lexically restricted constructs. So we had a majority of production with pronouns, so nessuno, niente, instead of production with complex, with lexically restricted, let's say, ADP constructions, so nessun gatto, nessuna persona. And those were clear data also in the other corpus, even if in the other corpus we had already well-produced target production in A1 level, but they were not clearly, let's say, erupting as for the A2 level. Doing the error analysis, we found two main non-target-like production. So the first one is non, so the negator, plus the positive polarity item, Italian style. And in this case, it was mostly qualche. And we can see sentences like, in Italia non ne ho preso mai qualche metro davanti, visito Milano. In Italia non ho mai preso nessuna metro prima di visitare Milano, should be the target line production. So in Italy, I had never taken any metro before visiting Milano. Or fortunately, I did not eat any or some spicy food, while in Italian we should use no spicy food. And the other production that probably someone will already have thought about is the negative quantifier not licensed by a preverbal negator. So we have niente or nessuno, but they are not licensed by the negation before. Okay, and this is clearly a mistake in standard Italian. So adding some more information about negative concord, I think we can say that it's acquired at A2 level, and the two main errors consist in the use of negation and positive polarity item, so non plus qualche, or a standalone negative quantifier. We don't have a clear picture about the different acquisitional stages anyway of this. So we don't know if, for example, we have the first one structure emerging and then the other with the corpus analysis. And so the idea is to do a follow-up study, processing study, so using psycholinguistic methodology in order to have a deeper understanding of negative concord acquisition. I don't know with timing, can I present it? Or...
20 minutes.
Sure? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so this is an experiment that we just designed. We don't have the data yet, but the main questions that we ask ourselves are L2 speakers sensitive to errors related to negative concord? Maybe they are not sensitive at all in comprehension, and we will measure the accuracy for a speed acceptability judgment task. So a task in which the speakers have to judge sentences, but they have a time constraint, and reaction times. With self-paced reading. So it's a task in which the speakers have to read one word after the other, and we measure if there are if there are different reaction times in the conditions that should be grammatical, or if in the case that the speakers are not sensitive to the errors, they have the same reaction times with a negative concord construction and with non-target-like constructions. Then we're interested in understanding how does proficiency affect the sensitivity of the error. And so if the corpus data of this emergence of the structure at A2 level is confirmed by this study or not. And then probably we're going to run this with different L1s, so different languages that have a different system of negation. So German has a double negation language, English a language that has negative polarity items like any, and then languages, Italian, like let's say Spanish with a negative converse. The experiment is has a free per free design. So we have as conditions negative concord, negation plus positive polarity items, and standalone negative quantifiers, which are target-like condition, so negative concord, and two non-target-like conditions. And the idea is to run it through speakers of different proficiency level to see the development of the error sensitivity, for instance. Dependent variables are acceptability and reaction times. And the idea is to use 24 items and 24 filters. So the hypothesis that we have is that there will be an interaction between the free structure conditions and the other ones. Regarding accuracy, we expect accuracy, of course, to increase as the proficiency of the speaker increases. And regarding reaction times, we expect increased reaction times. So it means that speakers are slower for early accepted conditions. So in the moment in which the speakers really face an agrammatical condition, they start to get slow in the reading because they perceive that something is not really working in the full structure. For example, we don't have a license item or we have an item that is not making sense in between the context. We expect L1 Spanish speaker to present native-like tendencies even throughout the different levels. L1 English speakers effect for the double item structure. So when we have this double construction negation and positive polarity item will be accepted in the same way in lower level as the negative concord. And then German, no difference in between conditions, as German has this one negation, one negation reading. We also expect German speakers to understand, of course, that Italian is different and the double negation is not the double negation reading, but a negative concord reading. So the items will look like this. Anna went on holidays. The house she visited did not have the laundry machine. So a context that really can accept a negative concord sentence after it, like, and so she did not wash no clothes during the week because she didn't have a laundry machine. And you can see the three conditions. So condition number 1 is negative concord. Condition number 2 is negation plus positive polarity item, and negation and condition number 3 has only the negative quantifier not licensed by the syntactical negation. And here it's a bit more structured, so you see the different negative concord conditions. The first one with the negator so negative concord and negative concord item. They are grammatical, or at least not accepted in this context, negator plus positive polarity item, sum, and the negative quantifier, nessuno, unlicensed by definition. Yeah, I have more items if we need them for the discussion. But yeah, like the general conclusion of these studies aim to present this interaction between the interactional domain and the negation, and to propose a model for it. And regarding negative concord, is to present the different developmental studies, developmental stages that the corpus analysis could not really detect, even if it detected very clearly the emergence of these structures at H2 level. And yeah, thank you. So thank you very much. And I don't know how you want to manage the discussion.
Yes, normally we
Thank you.
ask people online if they have questions. So we start with participants online, and otherwise, yeah. Okay, well, I can start with a question since I don't see any hand online. Okay, so how can you distinguish the cases of negation that you talked about from those cases where there is a negation on a singular or single constituent? For instance, mangio non formaggio, ma prosciutto.
Yeah, those cases were not were considered as target-like constituent negation. So I
Okay.
didn't code those cases.
So you find them
Yeah.
and then you separate from the
Exactly.
other. Okay.
I consider
okay,
them
okay.
as a target-like production, but in cases like io sempre mangio non formaggio,
Okay.
so I always eat no cheese.
Mhm.
This
Okay.
is of course a non-target-like
Okay.
constituent negation.
Thank you. Mhm.
Well,
No, it's just a quick question, but
Yeah.
it just occurred to me when I read some of your examples. So these are Italian L2 learners, right? Have you considered the possibility of a kind of interference from L2 to L3? Because these look like, it really looks like a structure from English, right?
Yeah.
So it may be a kind of a replication of the pattern learned in English as a second language. And I know that there's a whole strand of research,
Yeah.
investigating how the L2 effect is a development of the L3 in that case.
Yeah, in order to run this, I'm super interested in the L2 to L3 discussion, but to run an analysis like I couldn't do it, also because how the corpus is built. They are mostly students of the Perugia Università degli Stranieri di Perugia, and so they are highly educated. So English was present for most of the speakers as an L2. Also, what we don't consider most of the time is that multilingualism exists also in China. And so, of course, at least Mandarin, and for instance, if I remember correctly, Cantonese do not have double, as both has double negation reading. So they're similar construction, but yeah. So.
I also thought about that when I saw that encore at the end of the sentence, which really reminded me of the yet at the end of the sentence in English.
Yeah. Of course, I have to think this in a framework outside the influence of the L2 to L3. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the corpus? I mean, how were the questions structured, and what kind of, do you know a little bit of that, and could you tell us more about it?
Yes, you can find the detailed information in the website of Corpus, Perugia Corpus. But for instance, the local corpus, so the Chinese speaker one, they had three possible, let's say, topics.
Okay.
And those topics were first impression of Italy and Italians, hobbies, plus holidays. And they had to choose in between one of those three to write their essay. And in the end of the course, they could not choose the same topic. So they had to choose a different one.
Okay.
Regarding the LIPS corpus, there are some topics, but they are a collection of oral exams,
Okay.
and so it's a bit more free.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there were some examples, of course, but they are also changing all over the year.
Right. How many participants? There are 175 participants in one corpus, right?
Yeah, in this one, yes.
And about the oral exams, do you know if there are the number?
I didn't write it, probably. No,
Maybe you
yeah.
did.
So yeah, those are the number of learners for also the oral exams. Actually, the LIPS corpus is a great resource from B1 level on, B1, B2, C1, C2 level, because there are tons of data. If you just see here, I took the data only from 2002, and there are more than all the aggregated data from the A1 and A2 level.
Okay.
So for all the years. So yeah, it's a very extensive corpus.
Thank you so much.
Well, I have two general questions. The first one is regarding Mica. So it's probably not used because the target language, let's say the standard language, should avoid the use of Mica. But I was wondering whether there was some use of this item or not, because maybe they cocked up the item just for from the people.
Yeah. There were not a lot of currencies of Mica. For instance, I checked it. Also, imagine that those were all the currencies for negative concord, and Mica is even more rare than negative concord currencies. So yeah, but if I remember correctly, when it was used in like good constructions. Probably because it was used like when it's a kind of discontinuous negation in the end, and it's used when the negation is mastered already.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. And the second question is connected with the connection between a strong TP and negation. And I mean, I see the connection, but could you zoom in on this connection? Because of course, the verb is supposed to move higher from the VP to the TP domain, and it could be the reason why we need a strong TP in order to have a full-fledged negation. But what is your intuition on that?
Yeah, and there are no strong L2 acquisition hypotheses on the idea of growing tree, no, as there are, for example, in L1. So these blocks that develop together. But I have a similar, at least, understanding of how this will work, meaning that if I have a very simple syntactic structure at the beginning when I'm learning a language, and probably I don't even focus on the syntactic structure because at the beginning, but just on superficial word order, the more I develop it, so the more cues I have, the better it is. And the main point here, I think, is that for Italian, it was not considered relevant as for languages with post-verbal negation, simply because the negation is higher in the syntactic structure. And yeah, so this is the main idea. Then the framework I like to, let's say, put all this analysis on is the processability theory. So it's an increasing, let's say, complexity that the learners use, reaching then a more complex also syntax relation, that you can have only if you have that full structure.
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems very understandable, and I think it's right to look at that connection. But I'm just wondering whether there is a structural interpretation of this connection. I mean, the non-negation in Italian is a clitic one.
Yeah.
Okay, we agree with that. And but the position of the negation is probably the mica, so the original one.
Yeah, we have the lab for that. No, yeah, there are different analyses, and of course, for instance, I'm relying on Zanutini and the Poletto analysis of this idea that anyway the negation has one initial projection, but then it realizes in different projection, higher or lower, as your example was saying. Yeah.
But in the dialect, this negation is reduced to no. Non vado, no vago. So the idea that the non is a clitic negation, I think, is supported by many. Yeah, and then with respect to that, the original position is not the position before the verb, but is incorporated with the verb and then move higher in a second stage. So I think it's interesting to see the connection between the strong TP and the negation, but it should be worked out with more structural interpretation.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I see that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just add a quick thing? Because I've been working with processability theory for a while, and I've worked mostly on Russian as a second language. And I think it would be very interesting to test these predictions within that framework. Just one note, because I know that processability theory uses concepts like feature unification. And the idea is that the higher the syntactic distance between the elements requiring feature unification, the more demanding the processing cost is, and hence the later the acquisition. So that could be very interesting. At the same time, you have to take into account the fact that processability theory derives its linguistic basis from lexical functional grammar, which is essentially a non-transformational theory. So a movement would be excluded as a kind of explanation phenomenon for these explanation, for these phenomena. So you would have to account it in a non-transformational way if you want to make it compatible with the assumptions of processability theory. But that would still be, very interesting to.
It's a great input. Thank you. Yeah.
Are there parallelism between the acquisition in L2, Italian L2 and Italian L1?
So regarding negative concord, for instance, I mean, there is, now I don't remember the authors, from Verona University, they published a paper. Meloni.
Melloni, Chiara Melloni. Yeah.
And they produced, and the research group produced extensive, an extensive research with a childless corpus, which takes into account all the L1 development. They also try to see negative concord development, but basically there are few occurrences also there. But in general, about negative concord acquisition, I don't know if your question was more on the negation acquisition or negative
Negation, about negation.
So it's actually similar, the trajectory that it's been proposed for the L1, also I think for German languages and so on, because verb raising. But in all those studies, in the 90s and early 2000s, I think negation was used as a test to measure verb raising and acquisition of other features like B2. And but it was not encoded in a more fine-grained analysis on the placement of the negator, because it was considered just.
But if you read now the data, child's, for instance, can you see some parallelism between the interaction also with L1, Italian L1 acquisition, an interaction, a strong interaction between negation and inflection and agreement, critics for children very difficult.
Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, I quit the analysis of child before moving to this hypothesis.
Okay.
So I just finished this, but it's a good.
Just to see something goes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was not thinking of coming back to that, but it's a good point. Yeah, for testing this connection. Yeah. I don't know why it did not come to our mind yet. Thank you.
That's the reason why you are our first visiting scholar. To gather some.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if
Maybe
maybe online. No. Perfect. So thank you.
Paolo?
Since we've been talking about negations, we don't have no event for you. So let me invite you to next week's speech. On the 24th of October, Jorge Vega Villanova of the Universität Hamburg will talk about acquisition and change in context settings on the morphosyntactic instability of object constructions in Bulgarian Judeo-Spanish. We'll see you next week here in 421. See you next week.
Bye.
Grazie.
Bye.
Ciao.
Grazie mille, ci vediamo.
Ciao.
Ciao.